Now, if that's not bulletproof knees, then I don't know what is.
What's up, guys? Enkiri here, and today we conclude our series on the knees over toes guy. Should you listen to his advice? Does he know what the heck that he's talking about? Now, if you haven't seen part 1 of the series yet, you should check that one out first before you watch this video, and I'll link that below in the description. I'll link that below in the description for those who missed it last week. But just as a quick recap, in part 1, we went over knees over toes guy's advice from the perspective of rehab, injury prevention, longevity, and durability. He touts himself as a guy who knows how to create bulletproof is one of his favorite words. He touts himself as a guy who knows how to create bulletproof, pain-free knees. So we analyzed his advice to see if those claims hold any water. And ultimately, I conclude that they really fucking do. The guy knows what he's talking about. I think that his longevity advice is pretty damn good overall. And if you want the full scoop, be sure to check out part 1 of this series. Now, aside from being a knee fixer, a knee wizard as he calls himself, the knees over toes guy also advertises himself as a guy who can help you to take your overall athleticism, your speed, your explosiveness, your power, your jumping ability, etc., to the next level. He's constantly talking about turning people into world-class athletes. So in part 2 today, we're going to analyze his advice from the perspective of building power and building explosiveness, which happens to be my wheelhouse and my passion. I've done a lot of research, got a lot of experience, a lot of practice, and a lot of training in this regard. Building power and explosiveness, developing the raw horsepower of the athlete. Now, is knees over toes guy advice, is his advice actually any good for taking an athlete, a good athlete, and making them into a great athlete? Will it take an elite athlete and actually turn him into a world-class athlete? Does he actually provide you with the tools to turn your game up a notch, take yourself to the next level, and develop your raw physical capacities and enhance your overall raw athleticism? So let's find out. Power and explosiveness, the raw horsepower of the athlete, the physical qualities that movement capacities are founded upon. I've discussed this concept and my theories on it in depth in my video titled Train Like an Athlete, What Does That Even Mean?, where we thoroughly dissected and debunked Jeff Cavaliere of AthleanX.com's motto and mantra of supposedly training like an athlete. And I'll give you a hint right here, Jeff ain't it. But if you want to hear my full thoughts on this subject, and you probably should, just click that video and give it a quick watch, because that will tell you all of where I'm coming from in this video. But I'll give you a quick synopsis here just real quick. I come from the school that says that body control, hand-eye coordination, kinesthetic awareness, etc., all that shit, the kind of intangibles of athleticism, it's in part nature, right? You're born with it. You have it or you don't, but it's also in part nurture. That is, you can also affect these capacities and these qualities to a very large degree. The major caveat there being that that development mostly occurs when you're young and when your body's still developing. So if you're a kid and you're watching this video right now, turn it off and go play outside instead. Go develop those qualities and those capacities right now, because that window, the window to do that optimally, will close soon. And once it does, once it closes, you won't really be able to open it again. So the analogy that I like to use here is that it's like learning a language, learning a new language. You do it when you're a child, right? And it just kind of happens automatically with very little conscious effort. You just realize one day, oh, I can talk and I know an entire language. And you try to do that as an adult. You try very hard. It takes a hell of a lot of work, a hell of a lot of effort, consistency, diligence, and it's really fucking hard, and it may very well be possible, but god damn, it is tedious and difficult, and you never really end up at quite the same level of expertise as a native speaker would be. So all that to say, a lot of the physical qualities that make great athletes great, the things that we think of that make the best athletes that no one else can replicate, those things, a lot of them develop primarily when we're younger, when we're kids, when we're adolescents, and even when we're teenagers. But athletes in their 20s and even in their 30s can still improve as they get older, right? They don't just all stagnate. So that can't be the only aspect at play here, right? And if we ignore actual sporting skill notwithstanding, like say getting better at dribbling the basketball or actually getting better at shooting the basketball, if we ignore those things, which are sporting skills, the primary mechanism to enhance athleticism in already developed athletes, already mature athletes, is to increase the horsepower of the athlete, increase their raw capacity, build them a bigger engine to use and a bigger engine to perform with. And we do this by building power and explosiveness and elasticity. Those things are some of the main components that dictate improvements in athletic explosiveness, agility, and overall movement capacity as we mature, and getting better at those things, moving better, more swiftly, more powerfully, cutting harder and sharper, jumping higher, running faster, accelerating faster. Those are the things that make you into a better athlete as you get older and older. And since power is drawn from a well of strength, in order to develop power, first we have to build strength, limit strength. So basically, from strength to speed, right? We need to get to speed, but we have to start with strength. It's a bridge. You have to build it if you want to reach the other side, which is speed, power, and explosiveness. Now, there are three main facets to accomplishing this. First, we build that strength because it's the most trainable quality, it's the most readily adaptable quality, it's the easiest one to influence. We start there. Once that quality is developed somewhat, then we are able to then segue that into strength speed, and then once the strength speed is developed, we can segue that quality into speed strength, right? We slowly build the bridge so that we can get from one side to the other side, but you have to build it in steps. You have to go in order. The most obvious example here would be something like this. First, squat to build limit strength in the legs, then perform power cleans to turn that raw limit strength into strength speed, then perform jump squats and vertical jumps to turn that power and that strength speed into speed strength. Ta-da, you crossed the bridge. It's simple, right? And there's obviously more to it than that, and about a million different permutations that you can work along the way, but that's kind of the simplified and condensed version. So does KneesOverToesGuy follow this formula? Does he help you to build the bridge, get from one side to the other? The simple answer is yes, he does. We see a large emphasis on strength exercises in his program. That would be the ATG split squat, his baby exercise, primarily for building leg strength there, right? Along with the Romanian deadlift for building hip extensor strength, the Nordic curl for building knee flexor strength, the calf raise and the tibialis raise for building lower leg strength, and the hip flexion exercises for building strength in the hip flexors. We do see plenty of strength work for the lower body speed and power muscles in KneesOverToesGuy's program. Moving across the bridge, right? Moving from strength a little further along the bridge, he also incorporates things like loaded jumping drills, loaded hopping to help build power and build elasticity and reactive strength. Now, where have you guys seen that type of stuff before? I wonder. Right? And then moving further along the bridge, he himself obviously also plays basketball. I assume he also coaches a lot of basketball players as well. So they would get these same sorts of training effects as he does, because basketball is essentially movement capacity training in and of itself. You're constantly accelerating, decelerating, cutting, bounding, jumping, hopping, all that shit. And he discusses some of these concepts in his YouTube videos, and he discusses how these same qualities can be trained outside of a sporting environment as well. And obviously I can't speak to the specifics of his paid programs because I don't have access to them, but the primary components for making these raw athletic improvements do seem to be present in the information that he preaches, and he seems to have a thorough understanding of not only how to progress within a certain movement and how to segue that movement into more difficult variations, but also how to appropriately bridge from one physical quality to another, get from one side of the bridge to the other, from strength all the way over to speed, which is ultimately, in my opinion, the absolute single most important concept of all when it comes to developing and slowly but surely, consistently improving raw athletic capacity in the long run. So I can see from what I've watched so far of his stuff, I haven't watched everything, but I watched a good bit of it. I'll link the videos that I checked out below in the description of this video series. But so from what I've watched so far, I can see how a lot of people would potentially be seeing really good improvements, athletic improvements using his program. Obviously, whether it works for you or not is ultimately all going to be goal dependent. But specifically, and most especially, where resolving knee pain and improving agility and the vertical jump are concerned, I can really see how those facets would be greatly improved on his programs. Some of the other facets of what I call raw athleticism, like sprinting speed and acceleration capacity, for example, I think would potentially be a little bit more dubious based on the information that he's made publicly available as to whether or not those aspects would actually see significant improvements or not as well. Those things don't seem to be addressed by him to quite the same degree or with quite the same emphasis as jump style training from what I've seen. Though he does claim to have made significant improvements in his own sprinting speed, which I will say is possible, even without an emphasis on actual sprint training, because of the incorporation of different plyometric style exercises, as well as posterior chain strengthening exercises, just for example. Now, my only real point of contention with him is the way that certain exercises seem to be prioritized and emphasized in his program. I think that a decent portion of what he's emphasizing, at least in his YouTube videos, again, I can't speak to his paid programs because I don't have access to any of them, but in his YouTube videos, I see a little bit of what feels like majoring in the minors, right? The ATG split squat, for example, which is his baby, and then the tibialis raise and the single leg RDL. I personally don't see these things as cornerstones of an athlete's program, whereas he does seem to view them that way. Personally, I think that their greatest value probably exists in terms of building resilience and durability, that longevity perspective, right? But that can be done with these exercises being used in a secondary position in the program rather than a primary position. And in terms of improving raw leg strength in the greatest and most optimal fashion possible, I have to say, why not just use a full range of motion bilateral squatting variation, a traditional squat like a front squat or a high bar back squat, instead of the ATG split squat as your primary squat variation. An advanced athlete or an elite athlete is a different story. Once you've already built that requisite strength, the requisite strength levels, you can basically do whatever the hell you want. And personally, I haven't done a squat since July, and I'm not losing any athletic capacity because of it. My legs right this very minute might not be as strong as they were 6 months ago, but where running and jumping and power are concerned, that's basically irrelevant at this point because my baseline level of raw leg strength relative to my body weight is so high past the necessary threshold to begin with that losing a tiny bit of leg strength doesn't really matter, and I'm better off allocating my resources elsewhere. But I built that strength with bilateral squatting variation. But you don't get to that point by focusing on things like split squats. At least you don't get there as fast as you could. And I don't think that you will ever build legs as strong by focusing primarily on split squatting as you could build if you focus primarily on front squats or high bar squats, especially earlier on in your training career. Now, there are other merits to that exercise, and I discussed those in part 1, so it should not be dismissed altogether. But raw strength capacity, in my opinion, is not one of them. And for the tibialis raise, again, I think that the primary value there lies in a rehab setting. I think I mentioned that last week. Outside of that, I think it probably can have some minor to moderate value for an advanced athlete who's trying to squeeze out every ounce of progress that they can, which KneesOverToesGuy himself is obviously an elite athlete. So it makes perfect sense for him to be focusing on it in his training. But I certainly don't think that it's any sort of magic bullet, and I don't think that beginners or intermediates really even need to worry about something like that yet, simply because there are bigger fish to fry first. And then with the single leg RDL, the Romanian deadlift, it's kind of the same deal as with the split squat. I just don't see the value in placing a unilateral variant into a primary exercise slot. Use the unilateral version as a secondary or ancillary component to your comprehensive training program, but keep the bilateral version as your big dog, and you'll build more hip extensor strength in the long run. That's just is what it is, but he's putting a level of emphasis on these exercises that makes them feel like they should be primary exercises rather than secondary exercises. And as an addendum to that, I would also like to see him include some sort of a glute-focused posterior chain exercise in his program as well. I haven't run across that yet. I could have missed it, but I haven't seen it. So it seems he emphasizes the hamstrings a bit more than the glutes, right? He has the Romanian deadlift, a seated good morning, and a very large emphasis on the Nordic leg curl in his program, all of which are hamstring-dominant posterior chain movements. So I would like to see a glute-dominant posterior chain movement included here as well. My personal favorite here is the hip thrust. So really just a few minor disagreements, honestly, in terms of what constitutes optimal exercise priority and optimal exercise emphasis. But overall, I think that the guy's methods are very sound in terms of rehab and longevity, building strong, durable, and resilient knees, ankles, and even hips. I think that the methods and the ideas that he's espousing are a fucking one, point blank. And then in terms of building up the horsepower of the athlete, increasing the size of the athlete's engine, building explosive power and reactive strength and movement capacity, I think that if you're able to sift past some of the noise and analyze the actual framework that he's espousing, that you will be able to use his methods with great success. I don't agree with everything he says here, but I think that his overall theories and his overall methods are sound. And I think that he's providing plenty of golden tidbits for us to extract and use in our own training to make ourselves better, more resilient athletes, and overall higher level performers. I've already taken some stuff from him and started using it in my own training. Ultimately, the most important part of all is just to extract things within the proper context, right? Nothing that I've seen him say is outlandish, but some of the stuff he's preaching can be pretty niche. Much of it won't be particularly useful for strength athletes or dudes who are just concerned with building massive strength and maximizing muscle hypertrophy. But a great deal of it can be incredibly useful for athletes or for guys who are primarily interested in improving movement-based performance or just becoming more well-rounded, you know? Overall, though, I think that he's one of the good guys. And as far as training like an athlete goes, well, let's just say that he is advocating that concept a whole hell of a lot more than the motherfucker who coined the phrase. Anyway, that is all I got for today, guys, and that wraps up this two-part series. And remember, this one was by popular demand, and it took a damn lot of research and a hell of a lot of time to watch all of his stuff, compile all this information, and make these videos. So if you requested this series or you just enjoyed watching it, please remember to hit the like button, share the video around so that it can get some views, and leave me some love in the comments down below so that crotchety old YouTube Mr. Algorithm doesn't forget about me. And if you really enjoyed the series here, then be sure to visit my website after you smash the like button, of course, and pick up one of my training programs. That's www.enkirieliteFitness.com/templates. I've got programs for beginner trainees, programs for intermediate trainees, programs for advanced trainees, and performance-minded trainees like myself, as well as dudes who want to maximize their vertical jumping ability, their running speed, and their overall athleticism. So if you enjoy this kind of information, if you find it helpful, like what was in today's video, you will definitely like my training programs as well. And that support is what helps me to keep releasing free content like this. So be sure to grab that. I really hope you enjoyed this two-part series. Keep training hard, and I'll catch you guys next time.